Some people go silent in a massive crisis, not because they are frozen by fear, but because they are running a mental script that most people never notice in real time. Society thinks strength is loud. We picture the hero who dominates the room, the leader who barks orders through the chaos. But true psychological power is almost entirely invisible. It is not found in the absence of emotion, but in a rare mastery over it. A mastery that places you ahead of 99% of the population. While the crowd wears masks for social survival, a genuinely powerful mind operates on a completely different frequency. To measure where you stand, there are 9 distinct signs to look for. And you need to pay close attention to the 7th. It is the exact trait most people mistake for a personality flaw. But in reality, it is your greatest hidden psychological weapon. The first sign reveals itself in the presence of fear. When a terrifying decision approaches, the average person waits. They wait for the right moment. They wait for the anxiety to fade. They wait for a sense of safety that in reality never comes. They let fear dictate the borders of their life, shrinking until their world is small and predictable. But a secretly powerful person still experiences intense fear. Their heart still races. When they have to leave a secure job or set a hard boundary, their body is flooded with a sudden, massive spike of cortisol and adrenaline. Their hands may literally shake, but they step willingly into the discomfort anyway. They use a psychological tool called Arousal Reappraisal. When the average brain feels a racing heart, it interprets the physical sensation as danger, but the powerful brain trains itself to interpret that exact same racing heart as readiness. They understand a fundamental truth. Confidence is not a prerequisite for action. Confidence is the reward you get after you take the action. The second sign happens in the immediate aftermath of a failure. Imagine sitting in a room and receiving a harsh public critique at work. When a sudden setback arrives, the average person lets the emotional brain take over. They immediately fall into a catastrophizing loop. They let temporary panic dictate permanent decisions. They burn bridges because they feel a momentary sting. But this person does something entirely different. They allow themselves to feel the grief. They allow the anger. They do not suppress the human experience, but they do not let it drive the car. Instead, they force a pause. They let the rational mind enter the room and they ask themselves, my emotions say this is a catastrophe, but what does the data actually say? This ability has a name in clinical psychology. It is known as cognitive reappraisal. It is the rare capacity to balance raw emotion and cold logic while the world is still burning around you. But true mental strength goes even deeper than emotional control. It requires a ruthless internal filter. Most people waste a staggering amount of energy fighting ghosts. They obsess over the global economy, the unchangeable past, and the opinions of strangers they will never meet. When faced with an obstacle, the human default is to complain. But a secretly powerful mind knows that focusing on uncontrollable variables leads directly to learned helplessness. It is the psychological trap of giving up your own agency. To protect themselves from this, they bypass prolonged complaining. They zoom in entirely on what they can physically affect. They ask one focused question: what is the next physical action I can take to improve this? In behavioral science, this is maintaining a strict internal locus of control. They know that energy is their most precious resource, and they absolutely refuse to leak it into things they cannot change. The fourth sign is revealed when a blueprint falls apart. Human beings are biologically wired to crave predictability. When circumstances shift abruptly, the standard response is resistance. We cling to the way it used to be. But the secretly powerful mind recalibrates. When a plan collapses,
They don't spend a week mourning the loss of the map. They assess the new landscape and find a completely new route. They are immune to the sunk cost fallacy. Average people will stay with a bad plan, a bad job, or a bad relationship simply because of the time they have already invested in it. But a powerful mind cuts its losses immediately. This is because they have zero ego attached to the past. Psychologists refer to this as cognitive flexibility. Their identity is not tied to the initial plan, it is tied entirely to the ultimate outcome. The fifth sign is how they process inevitable tragedy. Life is guaranteed to deliver pain, illness, and loss. When this happens, many collapse into the identity of a victim, but others quietly rebuild their entire meaning system. They ask a very different question. What is this trying to teach me? This is not toxic positivity. A powerful mind doesn't smile through a tragedy and pretend that a horrific event is a blessing. They do not toxically ignore the darkness. They acknowledge the brutal, heavy reality of the pain, but they extract utility from it anyway. They view the hardship as resistance training for their character. Clinical experts call this cognitive reframing. It is the psychological alchemy of taking the raw materials of a tragedy and forging them into a new purpose. The sixth sign happens during a public mistake. Fragile people have to be right. They spend massive amounts of energy hiding their flaws, viewing a failure as a permanent indictment of their character. But a powerful mind views a mistake purely as data. They're the ones who will stop a meeting to say, "I actually don't understand this. Can you explain it to me?" They possess intellectual humility. Beyond that, they take unadulterated personal responsibility for their reality. Even if a situation isn't their fault, they recognize it is their responsibility to fix it. By refusing to cast blame, they retain all of their power. And they can do this because they have mastered dialectical thinking. They can hold two conflicting truths in their mind at the exact same time. They can say, "I am entirely responsible for fixing this terrible mistake, but this mistake does not diminish my inherent human worth." They love who they are today, but they respect themselves enough to demand a better version tomorrow. And this brings us to the seventh sign, the one most people completely misunderstand. Most people wear masks. They become versions of themselves designed for social survival. They're different around family, different around coworkers, but true powerful people become the same person everywhere. True mental strength requires a brutal level of authenticity. They align their daily actions with their core principles, even when it's incredibly inconvenient. If their value is integrity, they will tell the truth even if it costs them a client. And there's a heavy ripple effect to this trait. Society hates it. When you refuse to people please, you will be called stubborn, you will be called difficult, you will be labeled inflexible. Social isolation often comes with authenticity, but it's not stubbornness. Psychologists call this value-congruent behavior. It is the ultimate form of self-respect. They are perfectly comfortable being misunderstood by the crowd, so long as they are understood by themselves. The eighth sign requires a rare neurological stamina. We live in an era of instant dopamine. Society has lost the ability to wait. The average person's dopamine receptors are completely fried by cheap, instant hits of validation. But power belongs to those who can sit in the discomfort of delayed gratification. This person practices dopamine baseline regulation. They protect their neurochemistry for long-term, compounding rewards. They can put in hours of grueling, unglamorous work with no immediate payoff. They understand that the most valuable things in life take years to build. They are willing to look unsuccessful today, all to secure an asymmetrical payoff years down the line. They play the long game in a world that is obsessed with the sprint. And because they can wait longer than anyone else, they eventually win things that no one else can touch. And this brings us to the ninth and final sign. It reveals itself when someone else wins. Imagine sitting at a dinner table when a friend announces a massive promotion. In a competitive world, it's natural to feel the sting of envy. The average mind suffers from the zero-sum bias. This is the psychological illusion that success is a limited pie. When a peer gets promoted, the fragile ego feels diminished, as if someone else taking a slice means there is less for them. But a secretly powerful mind is immune to this bias. They operate with a secured identity. When someone else achieves a milestone, they are not threatened. They are inspired. Psychology refers to this as upward social comparison. They use the achievements of others as a blueprint rather than a weapon against their own self-esteem. They know a fundamental truth: someone else's light does not cast a shadow on their own path.
If this felt familiar, it's because you've been operating this way longer than you realized. You've been fighting battles that no one else sees. You've been building a foundation on ground that others thought was empty. Do not mistake your quietness for weakness. It is the sound of a mind that has mastered itself. Most people will never recognize that kind of strength until life forces them to look for it in themselves. But that quiet resilience usually goes hand in hand with another rare psychological trait. It is the uncanny ability to notice the subtle emotional details and hidden shifts in a room that everyone else completely misses. If that sounds like you, it means your mind is wired differently. Click right here to find out if you possess any of the 7 signs of highly perceptive people. We see you, and we'll see you over there.